We have a great session in the mix for you now. It's all about the blockchain. It's always been about the blockchain. So, with Patrick Byrne, CEO of Overstock.com T0. Please come to the stage, Patrick.
Thank you, Pat Patel. Hello, Money 2020 Europe. I'd like to start by saying I personally have found this one of the most productive conferences. I speak at a lot of conferences. This is one of the most, if not the most productive conferences I've seen, both from the quality of contacts we've made and from the quality of media here and just the organization. So I wanted to thank my host for really an exceptional conference, in my view. Who am I? You may have heard of, there was a Wired magazine story, been a number of them, but 2 years ago they called me the Bitcoin Messiah and the Scourge of Wall Street. I am neither the Messiah, well, I'm the Messiah of nothing. I do like Bitcoin, but as I've said for about 2 years, the main event of Bitcoin isn't Bitcoin, it's the blockchain. As far as Scourge of Wall Street goes, guilty as charged, I guess. You'll find out why. I'm going to talk about a subject that bores most people, but this may be just the right conference. When the world melted down in 2008, a few weeks into the meltdown, a month into the meltdown, Alan Greenspan was brought before Congress to say, he was retired, but Congress wanted to ask him what the heck is happening. And he gave an answer that something's been overlooked here. The left, by the way, has jumped on this and said, see, Alan Greenspan says markets don't work. It's more, you gotta listen carefully to what he says. Well, the volume didn't play, but anyway.
There are additional regulatory changes that this breakdown of the central pillar of competitive markets requires in order to return to stability, particularly in the areas of fraud, settlement, and securitization.
So we all know what the fraud was. Bernie Madoff types of things, securitization, collateralized debt obligations, and mortgage-backed securities. What's the settlement thing? Well, presumably everybody here knows what settlement is as a concept. Just when you've got grandpa buying a baseball glove from his neighbor, the act of exchanging the baseball glove for the money is settlement. In the capital markets, it's the same word is applied. When you buy securities from somebody, the trade is made on an exchange, but there's a subsequent settlement. In the US, it happens at 3 days after the trade, or what we call T+3. I think Europe has gone to T+2. Of course, we don't have grandpas talking to hedge funds. We have each are represented in the marketplace by a broker. And when they make a trade, you've got money in stock going back and forth between the broker-dealers. But it's actually not, well, that is actually how things worked up until the early 70s. In fact, it worked with fellows on bicycles. In 1969, I was a little boy and I went to Wall Street. And I was intrigued really not by anything about Wall Street other than there were these guys on bicycles riding around with burlap sacks. And they were called stock runners. In England, Britain, they call them jobbers. And there were folks floating all over Wall Street delivering sacks. One broker had a client who sold 100 shares or something to another, or 80 shares. And they're showing up a couple days later with stacks of certificates, and they had a whole system of clipping corners and initialing because your client bought 80 out of the 100, and they did all this crazy stuff. Well, in the 60s, the volume in the US capital markets quadrupled. And the guys on bicycles couldn't keep up, and the whole system logjammed. It was known as the Great Wall Street Paperwork Crisis, and there's probably no one here old enough to even know this, but in the early 70s, 68 to 71, Wall Street was only open 4 days a week and a limited number of hours each day because they were trying to give the folks on bicycles a chance to catch up. So they came up with a new system called Central Counterparty Clearing. Organization called the DTCC, a back office was created through which that would be the Central Counterparty Clearing. However, it wasn't even really that simple. It created a vault, a nominee called CD & Company. By the way, I'm told that on Wall Street there's three things you never talk about: God, politics, and CD & Company. That's where all the shares were actually deposited. By the way, who owns any stock in any publicly traded company in America? Raise your hand. Okay, all of us with our hands up are incorrect. None of you own any stock. All the stock is legally owned by a company no one ever heard of. It's in New Jersey. It has legal title to all the stock. I'm not just talking about storing. It actually has the legal ownership. It generates things called share entitlements. These are like IOUs for the stock, markers in a casino. And those go into the DTCC, and the money's in accounts at the DTC, and it moves around among accounts within the DTCC. There's a number of broker-dealers that are wired directly into that DTCC. They're called the clearing brokers, and then there are people wired into the clearing brokers. They themselves become the hubs of additional spokes. So there's about 100 clearing brokers and about 4,000 referring brokers, they're called, where, and as people trade, as you trade in the US stock market, and the European one works the same way. Your central security depository is called Euroclear. As people are trading, what's really going on is these IOUs for the stock, those IOUs are trading around in this cloud among these different entities. And why I say you don't really own anything, if you're a human being out there connected to a broker, connected to a broker, connected to you actually, all you have is a contractual right. You have a derivative claim, or you have a contractual right against a broker, as a contractual right against another broker, as a contractual right against the DTCC, who has a nominee, the CDN company, who actually legally owns everything. That, by the way, in 2008, that was a deep part of the crisis. And I saw just a month ago, I should have gotten this clip. It was either David Stockman or it was Bill Gross, formerly of PIMCO, came out and said what really happened in 2008, the deep cause of it all, the settlement system froze. No one knew who you could trade with. That settlement system, see, under certain conditions, just like in a metal, when you bend a metal, the molecules are flowing smoothly past each other, but every metal has something called the shear strength, and that's the point at which, beyond that much force, the molecules stop flowing smoothly, and the flow becomes jagged, and that's when the metal shears. The same thing can happen in a marketplace. Under sufficient force, the market can shear, and that's really what happened in 2008, that Wednesday morning, which is when the federal government acted. What's the right way to fix that? I think the right way to fix that is you drag Wall Street as it currently exists, you drag it behind the barn, and you kill it with an axe. What we do instead is there's this magic new invention called, and so by the way, that didn't all, this didn't all come out of a burning bush. This is all just stuff that got introduced. This design got introduced in 1971. The securities industry was dead set against it. In fact, the origin of NASDAQ is found in the broker-dealers organized not to adopt this system, but to have a peer-to-peer electronic settlement system. This was shoved down the throat of the industry by the US government, by the SEC. It was supposed to be a temporary solution, and in 1978, switching costs being what they are, they said, no, we're going to make it permanent. I think there's all kinds of mischief, or let's say, some people may know I was in a little falderall with Wall Street about 10, 12 years ago. It's because as I became aware of this system, I saw all kinds of opportunities for mischief and evidence that mischief was going on, not just about me, but about hundreds of companies, and that there was this opportunity for systemic risk. So after we drag it, or what do we do after we drag it behind the barn and kill it with an axe? The essence of the crypto revolution is we can now finally have trusted peer-to-peer value exchange with it, which will disrupt the centralized institutions doing that now. That's kind of the deep point of this blockchain revolution. For 6,000 years, humans have had this choice. Do we have consensual exchange? But I don't know you, you don't know me. I trade you a camel for a gold coin. Do I know you haven't debased the coin or not? Or we can have a central institution, let's say a mint, where some guy who has the monopoly on violence in this area stamps his face on a gold coin and says, use this for trading, anyone who debases this I kill. That's just a business model. We happen to call the business model government. It's one of the functions of government, but there's all kinds of business models which are essentially the same. It's strangers can't trust each other, so we have a central institution we each just trust. Land titling is another one. There's a whole bunch of them. Some of them are private, some of them are government. And the point is there's a whole bunch of centralized institutions which have been created to solve that problem. And from the liberal perspective, and in Europe I can use the word liberal correctly, in the US we use it incorrectly, but from these centralized institutions have a way over time of extracting, of growing big for their britches, of extracting more value than they're really adding to the equation. Which is why I don't have any qualms about saying they're going to be disrupted. That's the point of life, isn't the institutions. They're just things we created to do what we want to do. Let's imagine a new world. Imagine a world with a ledger. Just like my grandpa ran a hardware store, old-fashioned big ledger book. And imagine this ledger was cryptographically protected and public and transparent. And now when grandpa goes to buy a baseball glove, the money is actually coins within this ledger, or entries within this ledger. And all that's happening when the baseball glove is delivered is that a ledger entry is being made, erasing one coin from grandpa and adding it to his neighbor's stack. Well, you could do this on Wall Street too. You could say, you could turn stocks into shares of stock could instead be coins, tokens, and money as well. And then when you have an exchange for stock, all you're doing is you're erasing one coin and moving it, and erasing one stock coin and rewriting it in the other guy's account. That's not, if you had that, this whole net settlement thing could be replaced with true settlement, with real settlement. That's not just a theory anymore. We've been working on this for about 2 years. We created a company called T0 to do it. T0 refers to you don't need T plus 3. In fact, the slogan of T0 is the trade is the settlement. We're reuniting the trade and the settlement. In early 2005, we bought a company, Overstock bought a company on Wall Street called SpeedRoute. It's 2.5% of US equity flows. It also had an ATS, an alternative trading system, or a dark pool. The SEC gave us deemed approval on April 1st last year of that ATS, so it could actually trade blockchain securities. By the way, I don't like this word digital. People are now using digital to mean blockchain. Well, you know, Visa is digital, all kinds of things are digital. The distinctive characteristic is blockchain. Or I like to say crypto, but that turns people off. So we have an exchange which is allowed to do this, an ATS, a dark pool, which is allowed to do that. I believe we're still the only ones who have such a thing. We issued a private blockchain security last June. Actually, June I bought the first one, and then in August we bought, first one in the world, a private blockchain security, $5 million bond we sold to a First New York, a forward-thinking group in a hedge fund in New York. So in that, we took a $5 million coin and took their $5 million and did just this trade. It was all just recorded in the blockchain, no other evidence. Believe me, that took a great deal. I mean, these things sound simple, but each one of these things is like $1 million of legal fees and months of wrangling with folks with badges and guns to make sure I don't get thrown in under the prison for doing this kind of stuff, but we got it all. We, unlike sort of the Mt. Gox approach to what they did, we've done everything from the beginning, because I've got a lot of haters in Washington, D.C. because of my fight 10 years ago, and they will take any opportunity. They're not just going to put me in prison, they're going to bury me under the prison if they catch me doing something wrong. So everything we've done has been super square, right down the middle of the fairway. And we went to the regulators, we got great law firms, and we did everything right within the regulations. We then set about creating a public blockchain security. Again, $1 million or $2 million of legal fees, 6 months of wrangling with the SEC. In December of last year, just 3-4 months ago, they sprinkled SEC holy water on our S3, on our universal shelf to offer blockchain securities. I cannot say exactly when we're doing that, of course, and this is neither an offer to sell nor a solicitation of an offer to buy. California highway mileage will be lower. Don't run with that stick, you'll poke someone's eye out. But you can assume that we didn't spend all that time and money just to let that shelf actually sit on the shelf for 5 years. And we have a short token product. This is a stock securities lending product, and securities lending is part of the craziness. And we have something that's been live since September in test with a small number of clients, where we're supporting the securities lending industry with real locates, and it sort of cleans up some slop in the short selling industry. And we are ready to issue blockchain. We've applied well ago for patents on the intersection of blockchain and ETFs and ADRs and GDRs. And as you probably know, that's become a massive part of the capital market in the US. So we announced all of this in our normal, quiet, modest fashion with a big party at NASDAQ and a big 80-foot or 100-foot display on the front of NASDAQ. So that's where we are. We think we're at the leading edge of this field of the intersection of blockchain and capital markets, at least in the creation of blockchain securities. There are other people playing in different parts of it, but we're the only ones who actually have an exchange that has that can legally, in the US, who can legally trade blockchain securities, and we're the only ones who actually have SEC approval to now issue a blockchain security. So I deliberately left a few minutes in case anyone wants to do a shout out of any question. I don't think we're set up for any microphones or anything, but I can hear you from up here. Are there any questions? Sir?
Is it correct that you are going to enable e-residents to also access and e-residents to buy shares?
The question is am I going to let e-residents register and e-residents buy shares? What do you mean e-registrants?
E-residents, so that people can, using digital ID, buy shares on NASDAQ.
No, that's not. The question is, we're going to use e-residents so people can buy digital shares on NASDAQ. First, to buy this, you're going to, it's not going to be on NASDAQ. It's going to trade on our system. And that was on the T0 platform. And that was the point of starting with buying a node that's already part of Wall Street. Regulatorily approved, 2.5% of the order flow of Wall Street flows through it. It speaks FIX. You probably all know what FIX is. For those who don't, just like the internet speaks HTTP to itself, the financial industry speaks FIX. So we took a node that already speaks FIX to all these other nodes in the system, and we built all this blockchain stuff on top of it. So if you're plugged into that national market system, you can be able to access this. But the way it will work is brokers, individual brokers, who want to start offering, who have customers who want to have digital securities, just come and integrate to T0. It's a short amount of work. And so we then provide a wallet. So any broker-dealer who wants to take part just comes, do this quick integration, and you can then start offering, or they can then start offering their customers wallets. And then when those people want to buy Overstock's digital security or the digital security issued by any other company, they just go and use that wallet on their site. Incidentally, speaking of good contacts here, if there's any broker-dealers here who want to talk to us about making such an integration, we've got someone in the works. We need at least one so we can offer our digital security. But if there's anybody else interested, please get in touch. I've got a couple colleagues here. There was a booth. I guess it got torn down. But I've got a couple colleagues here, and we'd love to have more brokers take part. Time for one more quick question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Hi, Scott DeWicki. And I'd like to ask if you think T0 is going to be one of many or several regional exchanges, and you'll have some kind of digital handoff and maybe even some kind of digital escrow system to work with other exchanges that are going to be using the blockchain?
We are happy to work with other exchanges. We're happy to license our software to other exchanges so they can sort of jump ahead of the pack and get right on this. I'm more interested in that this crypto revolution wins than that I become the monopoly provider of this technology. But what I would like to do is, what I can say in closing is I'm all over the world these days. I've never seen anything like what's happening in the last 4 months in terms of interest in blockchain. Unlike Al Gore, and I'll wrap this up very quickly, unlike Al Gore, I was not there quite for the beginning of the internet, but I was there within a few years. And we knew that we were doing, the early folks in the internet knew they were doing something sort of as historic as the Gutenberg Bible. The people who are involved in this, and I think I'm the only guy I can think of who's been involved in both sides, people who are involved in this understand that this is going to be more disruptive than the internet itself. So, I'm not trying to be the monopoly provider. Happy to help anybody who wants to be. We want to license our technology and get it out there. Thank you very much, Money2020, and again, it's been a wonderful conference. Thank you, Pat Patel.